Video, we're going to be factoring to solve quadratic equations. Before we get to that, I want to show you a new rule here. So let's think about this equation. If AB equals 0, what must be true? Pause the video, think about that for a while, and then when you resume, you can see if you were right. Okay, so if AB equals 0, it must be true that A was 0 or B was 0. One of these factors has to be 0 in order for the equation to equal 0. Let's take a look at an example of that. It's called the zero product property. So when the product is 0, one of the factors must be 0. Here's an example. We have x plus 5 is one of the factors, and x minus 2 is the other factor. So you could think of this as A and this as B. Well, the zero product property is telling us that A equals 0 or B equals 0. So now we just have to solve these two equations and we can get our answer for x. So either x is -5 or x equals 2. I got that by subtracting 5 here and adding 2 here. I'm sure you realize that. And you can see that it works by plugging in x up here. -5 plus 5 would equal 0, and 0 times anything equals 0. It would also work if x were 2. I can plug in 2 here. 2 minus 2 is 0, and then multiply by whatever this is, doesn't even matter, right? Well, if x is 2, this is 7, but it doesn't matter because b was 0. So let's check some more examples here. We can think of this as being A and this as being B. So we know that n equals 0 or n plus 2 equals 0. Therefore, either n equals 0 or, if we subtract 2 from both sides, n would equal -2. So here's our two possible answers. And let's go down to the green one. So again, this first factor here we could consider A, so 7y plus 2 equals 0, or the second factor, 3y minus 5 equals 0. So we're going to have to solve each of these to figure out what y equals, because it's not that y itself is 0, it's that the whole factor is 0. So we're going to solve this for y. So we get 7y equals -2. And we're going to divide by 7 and get y equals -2 sevenths. And then over on this side, we're going to add 5 to both sides. And we're going to get, then we're going to divide by 3. And we're going to get y equals 5/3. So you may already see the benefit of this technique, because if we were graphing, we would not be able to decide that we're at -2 sevenths. All we would know is that we're somewhere in between 0 and -1, and over on this side, somewhere in between 1 and 2. But it would be impossible to decide that we're at -2 sevenths or 5/3. So graphing wouldn't work for this example. Alright, now we're going to get into what I talked about before, which is factoring to solve. So in this case, we can't use the zero product property because there are no factors. There's no product over here. All we have is some things being added together. So in order to use the zero product property, we need factors. So if we remember back in last chapter, we learned how to factor things that look like this. So we're going to need factors of C that add to B, which are 10 and 1. And remember, those plug right into our binomials, x plus 10 and x plus 1. But now we have this equation that we can now solve because the zero product property is now in effect because we have factors that multiply to equal 0. Therefore, we know that x plus 10 equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0. And by solving these, subtract 10 on this one, I'll move up here, we know that x equals negative 10 or x equals negative 1. And it's easy to check that because we could say, well, negative 10 times negative 10 is 100 plus negative 110. So now we're at negative 10 plus 10 is 0. And we could check it for negative 1 and it would also work. So both of these are correct answers. All right, let's check out the green example now. Green example, there's a couple things we need to deal with before we use zero product property. Obviously, it doesn't equal 0, so that's the first problem. So we need to make it equal 0. Well, that's pretty easy. We just subtract 21 from both sides, and we end up with p squared minus 4p minus 21 equals 0. So now we're almost ready to use zero product property, but again, we don't have factors, so we're going to need to factor this. So we need factors of c that add to b. Let's see, 7 and 3 looks like they're going to work, so it's going to be negative 7 and positive 3. So now we know that p minus 7 times p plus 3 equals 0. Now the zero product property is in effect, so if we solve each of these for 0, we move down a little bit here. So we know that p minus 7 equals 0 or p plus 3 equals 0. So if we add 7 to both sides here, we get p equals 7. And if we subtract 3 from both sides here, we get p equals negative 3. And again, if you plug both of these numbers in for p up here, you'll find that they work. Right? 7 squared, so 49 minus 28 would be 21. If we plug in negative 3, we get 9 plus 12 equals 21. All right, one last problem. Let's pretend that you made a beautiful piece of art in art downstairs, and you want to put a frame around it. You want the total area of the frame and the art to be 315 square inches. So this whole big rectangle, you want it to be 315 square inches. You just don't know how big the border is going to be, but you know that your painting is 17 by 11 inches. So how do we figure out how big this frame should be? Well, we basically need the dimensions of this big rectangle. Well, the small rectangle is 17 inches, but then there's an x on this side and an x on this side, so 2x plus 17 is the length up here, and we know the width is 11 inches of the art, but then there's an x here and an x here, so we have 2x plus 11 is going to be the width, x plus 11. So we know that the factors are 2x plus 17 times 2x plus 11, and we want that to equal 315. Okay, well here we can't use the zero product property because there's no 0 here. So when we subtract 315 to get a 0 here, the problem is the left side doesn't have like terms yet, because since these are supposed to be multiplied together, we can't really subtract that 315 yet. So what we end up with is these two factors equaling jumping on there. These two factors minus 315 equaling 0. So I can't use zero product property because minus 315 isn't a factor, it's subtraction. So first thing I need to do is do a little simplifying on the left side. So I'm actually going to FOIL this. That's going to give me 4x squared plus 22x plus 34x plus whatever 17 times 11 is. Let's see, 170, 187 minus 315 equals 0. Still simplifying the left side. I'm going to get 4x squared plus 56x minus whatever 315 minus 187 is. So 8 to 128 equals 0. Now I'm getting closer. I have the left side simplified. The right side is 0. Now I just need to have the left side be factors. First thing, step 1, I can factor out a 4 here. I get x squared plus, let's see, was that 14, 28? Yeah, 14x minus, let's see, 25, 32, maybe? I'm not sure. Let's try that. 32 times 4, 8, 12, yeah. Okay, so 32 equals 0, and I keep factoring here, so I have a 4 and a, let's see, factors of 32 that add, factors of negative 32 that add to 14. I guess 16 and negative 2? Yeah, okay. So now we have x plus 16, x minus 2. Now the zero product property is in effect. Now we have 3 factors, but 4 obviously can never equal 0, so we don't have to include that. So we could say x plus 16 equals 0, or x minus 2 equals 0. So x must equal negative 16, or x must equal 2. Now we're in the real world here, so the border cannot equal a negative distance, so we can get rid of this one. We don't care about that. So we know the border must be 2. Okay, so let's go back to the original question. What should the dimensions of the frame be? Well, they need to be 2x plus 17, so in this case, plug a 2 in here and you get 21 inches. And plug a 2 in here and you get 15 inches. So the dimensions of the frame, 21 by 15 inches. Alright, thanks for watching.